This is Farris with Smash the Numbers. In this edition, I am going to go through the Michigan schedule game by game, and I'm going to tell you which games I think Michigan will win or lose. And I will give you the final record. I'm going to have a little bit of flexibility because I believe Michigan has 9 games they should be at least a touchdown favorite as in terms of at game time, and there are 3 games where they're likely to be the underdog. So I'm going to go over all of that. I'm also going to go through several of the games, and kind of explain which game I would go to in terms of value for the current ticket price. All Michigan games for the entire season are sold out, so you're going to have to get the games in terms of a resale price. So we're going to look at SeatGeek, which is the partner of University of Michigan, and I'm going to kind of point out where I think the value is in games to go to in Ann Arbor. Coming up next. All right, before the Fresno State game starts, I'm going to go ahead and make my predictions game by game. I will also adjust these, but as the season goes on, obviously, because we'll have to see, in particular, the quarterback position as well as other positions on the field, how Michigan is doing, obviously injuries, etc. All of that feeds into potential predictions. So here we will now share the schedule and let's go game by game. All right, so Fresno State, I do believe that Michigan should take care of Fresno State. I am predicting a score of 31 to 8. That just popped in my head. So don't ask me how Fresno State gets to 8. I guess a touchdown and 2-point conversion. I do think there's arguments for this game to be either conservative, but I actually think that since there are 2 quarterbacks potentially that are vying for one position in the Texas game, I do think that they are going to take risks and, in order to win the job. So I think it will actually be relatively high scoring on the Michigan end. So I'll give Fresno State a W. Texas, I am going to go ahead and say that Michigan is going to lose the Texas game. I'm saying it kind of tentatively here, or with a little bit of hesitation, because there is a decent chance that they could win. Perhaps, Texas, in terms of the best games of the year, perhaps Texas and Oregon are kind of vying for that. Let's see what happens in the Fresno State. But for now, based on what we know, the unknowns at quarterback, I'm going to say that they're going to lose that game. All right. Then we have a stretch of Arkansas State. They're going to win that game. That's basically a warm-up game, so to speak. Then we have USC. There may be some danger here with respect to this game, but I do think Michigan will be a touchdown favorite, and they will go ahead and win that game. Then we have Minnesota. Michigan will win against Minnesota at home, in my view. Washington, some others think that Washington may be a tricky game, or I'm sorry, an easy game. I actually think they're going to the West Coast. The game times to be announced, but obviously there's a time zone change, etc. Washington's a very loud stadium in Seattle, so I do think that on the field they may be better players in Washington, but I do think there are enough factors there that there could be the elements of an upset. Illinois in Champaign. Illinois once in a while does do something tricky and, is able to do an upset. I don't see that happening here. So I think Michigan wins that game. Although it is a bit of a road trip, sort of, or back-to-back road games, Seattle and Champaign. So just kind of keep that in mind. If they take care of business with Washington, the another game that could be a trip-up game, look-ahead game, is Illinois. After that, they have Michigan State. I think they'll be fired up for that, and yeah, they should take care of business against Michigan State. So we'll see what happens with respect to Michigan State's season this year, but I am thinking that they'll probably have a down year, but that doesn't necessarily mean when they play Michigan, things could be different. Obviously, last year was 49-0, so that wasn't the case last year. All right, then we've got Oregon. So I think this is the game of the year. In a previous video, I kind of went over the idea that Oregon is really the pivotal game of the year. Whether or not they lose to Texas, I believe Oregon's either going to be either going to be the game that will put them into the college football playoffs, or if they do beat Texas, it'll be the game that will put them into uh, really consideration in kind of that top four for a bye and maybe even beating Ohio State. All right. Well, back to back with Michigan State in Oregon could be tricky. Um, I think they beat Oregon. That's my view. It's going to be the pivotal game, the most important game of the year. It'll be a de facto playoff game, and it is in conference. Michigan will be at home. Looks like Michigan State may be a night game, which would then make Oregon, I would think, a day game. So I'm thinking one of these two is going to be a night game right now. According to the Michigan website, they are both TBD, TBA in terms of game time. But if the Oregon game was night, I'd probably feel even better about it. Or maybe, Oregon at noon is 9 o'clock their time. Maybe there is an advantage there. So I think Michigan is going to be a better team in late October, early November than they are potentially at the beginning of the year. Kind of think Jalen Milroe not being the clear number one last year, and then they earned the job. Now, maybe Alex Orji does something similar, or Davis Warren is the quarterback, QB1. Either way, whoever that quarterback is, they'll feel more comfortable, in my view, in late October, early November, obviously barring any kind of injury, etc. All right. Then we've got Indiana. Michigan should take care of business with Indiana. And then we have Northwestern, which is a home game. It would have been fun to have that game in the temporary facilities that they have in Northwestern, but that'll be a home game. And then, of course, we have Ohio State in Columbus. Now, what I think about Ohio State, I think there's a chance Michigan could win, but they are, as it stands right now, a 9.5-point underdog. I'm going to go ahead and put that as an L. So what that means is that Michigan will lose one game out of conference. They'll lose the Texas game, but they will go ahead and take care of business with Oregon, and then they will lose to Ohio State. Their final record will be 10-2. And what does that mean in terms of getting to the Big Ten title game? What does that mean in terms of getting to the Big Ten title game? It really depends. I think there's going to be a log jam at the top of the Big Ten. I think Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan are all going to go 1-1 against the other two. So that is going to set up some tiebreakers. Penn State doesn't have to play Michigan, so that's an advantage for them. Rutgers has a relatively easy schedule. There are a lot of opportunities for a lot of teams to have one or two losses and potentially get to the Big Ten title game. Michigan would only have one loss in conference under the scenario that I gave. So, I'll remove this for a second. So I think they do not get into the Big Ten championship game, but they do get to be in the top 8 seeds. Now, if they're in the top 8 seeds, what does that mean? It means that they get a home game and hear me out here, it actually might be an advantage for Michigan because they would get a home game after a bye. So hear me out here. The bye is that they would not have to play the Big Ten title game. All right, so they don't have to play the game. It's a hard game. It's going to be against Oregon. It's going to be against Ohio State or a team of that caliber. They don't even have to play that game. Then they get to have a home game for game two. Now, the ideal home game would be to be the number 5 seed in the tournament, in this 12-team tournament, because they would play the number 12 seed, which would not be a Power 4 team. I think that's unlikely. Ohio, in this scenario that I'm laying out, probably Ohio State's in the top 4, Oregon's in the top 4, Michigan's 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there. But regardless, chances are they'll end up getting maybe a team from the South, or even if it's a team like Penn State or something like that, that could happen as well. But either way, they'll be able to play that game at home. So other than being able to have the quote unquote Big Ten title, I'm not at, there may be some opportunity for Michigan to have an easier path than certainly the loser of the Big Ten championship game, and maybe even the winner, having that extra home game against a lesser opponent. All right, so the next thing I wanted to do is kind of talk about, okay, it's possible that Michigan does beat Texas, but then stumbles against the two that I see is something within Washington, Illinois, but probably the Washington. That's a stumble there, and then USC. So those are the other games that could pose a problem for Michigan. So if they can beat Texas, that gives them what I'd call a mulligan, something that we didn't really have in the past. So that is an opportunity for Michigan. So now let us go to the schedule. I'm sorry, the schedule in terms of the cost per ticket. And I'm going to go over a couple games, and I'll tell you which one I think is the best value to go to. All right. First of all, I didn't even try this. Let's click on this buy now. See what happens if you click on it. I believe all the games are sold out, so it kind of just goes back to the same spot that it was before. Every game is sold out. So let us first. Well, let's see what the Fresno State is, in case you want to go right now. And we've got a ticket here for $25. So if you're listening to this as of the time I'm posting this, just before 2.5 hours before game time, you should be able to get in. The get in the door price is very low, $25. A lot of times it does do that. If you just are not, if you're flexible in terms of where you're going to sit, you might be able to get a really good seat. All right, so now let's look at the Texas game. And the Texas game, I actually saw, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour ago, it dipped under 200. Now we're seeing 377. I'm gonna sort this by price. Let's see what the very low. Oh yeah, we do have one at 221. So we have several seats that are below 250, which is probably about half of what it was 4 or 5 weeks ago. So as we're getting closer to the game time, there is an opportunity there. Okay, I'm gonna share these now so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. All right, sorry about that. The screen was frozen because I was sharing a different screen there. So let me just quickly show you that for Fresno State, there are tickets. Just a second ago, there was a $25. Yes, it is still there. Let me show you that. All right, there we go. Here we go. So Fresno State, we've got a $25 ticket right here. So as of recording this, a couple hours before game time, that's definitely available. So that's great. Prices have dropped on that game. Texas, I sorted this by price, which is what I did a second ago. And when we see that these prices have dipped to about half of what they were for maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago. So that's a good sign. I'm going to go back to single game football tickets, and we are going to go to Michigan State. And we are going to look at what Michigan State has. And Michigan State prices are start by price, $150. So it is um, for Michigan State, usually that is actually a pretty reasonable price. Michigan State's down, and Michigan has a ton of big games this year, so that's probably why. So that's not a bad game. Let's keep going. Let's go to Oregon. I'll go back to USC in a second. All right, we go by price, and the prices start at 166 for Oregon, and so I think this is the game of the year. If I were to go to one game, it would be this one against Oregon, just because of where it is on the schedule and the fact that it is a conference game. So those two factors together, I think, make this the most important game of the year, regardless of what happens with Texas. All right, let's keep going. And I'm going to go backwards to USC. I forgot about USC. So let's take a look at USC. And for USC, prices starting around 150, which is kind of in the MSU range. So, you kind of have a choice if you're in that range, MSU or USC. USC will probably have better weather. It is September 21st instead of later in the season. Obviously, the Michigan State game is very important as a arch rival. So both those games make sense. I'm noticing here for USC, Michigan's going to attempt to do a stripe out fans attending the game in even number section, blah, blah, blah. It will be interesting to see if that works. I don't remember if Michigan's done that before. As I stated earlier, for only $50 more, November 2nd, Oregon, that is the game I would go to. And I think that is actually the best value game as well. Obviously, you could go to some of the lesser games, and I think some people do that. I've done that in the past, where you go to a game just to have fun. Michigan's going to win. Let's see what Northwestern's game is going to be. What the tickets are for that. And you were hovering around $50. I would say if you're going to do one of those, I would avoid the Northwestern game. Michigan often does not play that well before the Ohio State week. Recall last year when they played Maryland, and that was actually a pretty close game. So instead, perhaps, Arkansas State, they're definitely going to win that. Let's go Minnesota. That might be a better. All right, and let's go to price. Minnesota, a little bit more expensive, $75, but I think it's probably worth it to see the Minnesota game. If I were to pick one kind of the lesser tier where we're pretty sure Michigan's going to win the game. So that's my analysis. So the number one game I'd go to is Oregon, and just double checking here, we're talking about $166 for that game. Recap of the season, I think Michigan is going to be 10-2. If they beat Texas, they get a mulligan to potentially not have to beat USC or Washington or some other stumble that's along the way, and they would still be able to get in as long as they beat Oregon. So win the Oregon game. That's the pivotal game. That's the most important in the game, and the one that I would buy tickets to. Let me know which game you are interested in going to and what you think the final record will be.